I still remember the moment everything changed. The moment when 6 years of sacrifice, exhaustion, and unconditional love came down to a single envelope in a courtroom. I sat at the wooden table, my hands folded in my lap, trying to stay calm. My fingers wouldn't stop trembling. The courtroom smelled like old wood and paper, and the fluorescent lights above made everything look harsh and cold. Across from me, Brandon sat with his lawyer, a sharp-looking man in a suit that probably cost more than I used to make in 3 months. Brandon looked so different from the man I married. His suit was designer, perfectly tailored. His watch caught the light every time he moved his wrist. Even his haircut screamed money. He sat there with his chin up, looking confident, almost bored. Next to me, Maggie squeezed my hand under the table. She'd been my best friend since we were kids, and now she was my lawyer too. She took my case without charging me a single dollar because she knew, she'd always known, what I'd given up for Brandon. Brandon's lawyer stood up, buttoning his jacket with a smooth motion that seemed rehearsed. His voice was loud and clear as he addressed Judge Henderson, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and grey hair pulled back in a tight bun. Your Honour, my client, Dr. Brandon Pierce, has built an impressive career through his own hard work and dedication. He graduated top of his class from medical school and is now a respected cardiothoracic surgeon at Metropolitan Elite Hospital. During his marriage to Mrs. Morrison, she worked various low-skill jobs: cashier, waitress, cleaning lady, contributing minimally to the household while my client pursued his demanding education and career. I felt my stomach twist. Low-skilled jobs. Minimally contributing. The words felt like slaps across my face. The lawyer continued, pacing slowly. Mrs. Morrison, while pleasant enough, never pursued any meaningful career development. She has no college degree, no specialized skills, no significant assets of her own. My client is requesting that this divorce be settled swiftly, with Mrs. Morrison receiving a modest alimony payment of $1,000 monthly for 2 years. This is more than generous considering she made no direct financial investment in Dr. Pierce's education or career advancement. No direct financial investment. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from crying. How dare he? How dare they both? I glanced at Brandon. He was nodding along with his lawyer's words, that same cold expression on his face. This was the man who used to hold me when I came home at 2 a.m, so tired I could barely stand. The man who used to kiss my rough hands and promise me that someday he'd take care of me the way I was taking care of him. Furthermore, the lawyer said, pulling out some papers, Dr. Pierce has generously offered to allow Mrs. Morrison to keep her personal belongings and her vehicle, a 2015 Honda Civic. He asks for nothing from her, as she has nothing of value to offer. He simply wishes to move forward with his life. Nothing of value to offer. Something inside me cracked when I heard those words. 6 years. 6 years of my life, my youth, my dreams. Nothing of value. I looked up at Maggie. She was staring at Brandon's lawyer with an expression that would have been scary if I didn't know her so well. She was angry. Really angry. When Brandon's lawyer finally sat down, looking pleased with himself, Maggie stood up. Your Honour, she said, her voice steady and strong, if I may present evidence that directly contradicts everything we just heard. Judge Henderson nodded. Please proceed. Maggie turned to me and gave me a small nod. This was it. The moment we'd prepared for. My hands shook as I reached down to the bag at my feet. The manila envelope felt heavy, like it contained the weight of 6 years. I stood up, my legs feeling weak, and walked toward the judge's bench. The courtroom was completely silent, except for my footsteps. I could feel Brandon's eyes on me, probably wondering what I was doing. I could feel everyone watching. When I reached Judge Henderson, I held out the envelope. She took it with a professional nod, and I walked back to my seat, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Judge Henderson opened the envelope and pulled out the documents inside. There were several pages, and I watched as her eyes moved across them, reading. At first, her expression was neutral, professional. Then something changed. Her eyebrows went up. She flipped to the next page and her eyes widened slightly. She looked up at Brandon, then back down at the papers. She read more, and suddenly, her lips pressed together like she was trying not to smile. She flipped to the last page, read it completely, and then something amazing happened. Judge Henderson started laughing, not a polite chuckle, not a quiet giggle. She actually laughed out loud, a real genuine laugh that echoed through the silent courtroom. She put her hand over her mouth, trying to control herself, but her shoulders were shaking. She looked at Brandon again, and that made her laugh even harder. I had never seen anything like it. Neither had anyone else, apparently. Brandon's confident expression crumbled. He leaned forward, confused. His lawyer looked startled, turning to whisper urgently to Brandon. In the gallery behind us, I could see Veronica Ashford, the pharmaceutical heiress, Brandon's new girlfriend, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. Her perfectly made-up face showed confusion and worry. Judge Henderson wiped tears from her eyes, still smiling widely. She looked directly at Brandon, and her expression changed from amused to something harder, colder. "Mr. Pierce," she said, and her voice had an edge to it now. "In 20 years of presiding over family court, I have never, and I mean never, seen such a clear-cut case of—" She paused, looking down at the papers again, then back up at him. "Well, we'll get into the details momentarily, but I must say, your audacity is truly remarkable." Brandon's face went pale. His lawyer was frantically whispering to him. I could see Brandon shaking his head, looking confused and angry. He had no idea what was in that envelope, no idea what evidence Maggie and I had spent weeks gathering. But I knew. And sitting there, watching his confidence dissolve, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt powerful. Judge Henderson set the papers down, folded her hands, and looked around the courtroom. "I think we need to revisit some facts about this marriage, don't you? Mrs. Morrison, let's go back to the beginning. Tell me about how you and Dr. Pierce met, and what happened during those 6 years while he was in medical school." Maggie stood up beside me. "Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to walk the court through the timeline, starting 8 years ago." "Please do," Judge Henderson said, and she still had that slight smile on her face like she knew something wonderful was about to happen. And that's when we went back to the beginning, back to when Brandon and I were different people, back to when we were young and in love and poor, living in that tiny apartment with dreams bigger than our bank account. 8 years ago, Brandon and I lived in a one-bedroom apartment that was so small you could touch both walls if you stretched your arms out in the hallway. The paint was peeling in the bathroom, the kitchen had exactly 4 cabinets, and the bedroom window had a crack that we covered with duct tape every winter. But back then, it felt like a palace because we were together, and we were in love, and we believed in the future. Brandon was 22, I was 20, and we'd just gotten married at the courthouse with Maggie and Brandon's cousin as witnesses. We couldn't afford a real wedding. We couldn't afford much of anything, really. Brandon had just been accepted into medical school, his dream since he was a kid. But medical school cost money, lots of money, more money than either of us had ever seen. I was in my sophomore year of college, studying communications. I loved my classes. I loved learning. But one night, about 2 months after Brandon started medical school, we sat at our tiny kitchen table with bills spread out in front of us, and we both knew something had to change. "Grace," Brandon said, running his hands through his hair the way he always did when he was stressed, "I don't know how we're going to make this work. Tuition is due in 3 weeks, and even with my student loans, we're short. And we still have to pay rent, electricity, food." I looked at the numbers. I'd been looking at them for hours. Brandon's part-time job at the campus library paid almost nothing. My part-time work at the supermarket wasn't much better. His student loans covered tuition but barely touched living expenses. We were drowning and we hadn't even gotten to the deep water yet. "What if I took a year off school?" I said quietly. Brandon looked up at me. his eyes tired. What? Just 1 year? Maybe 2? I could work full-time, maybe get a second job. Once you finish medical school and start your residency, I can go back. Grace, no, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering. I reached across the table and took his hand. Brandon, being a doctor is your dream. You've wanted this since you were 8 years old. Communications? I like it, but I can study that any time. You can't put medical school on hold. If you leave now, you might never go back. We stayed up all night talking about it. Brandon protested, said it wasn't fair, said he'd find another way. But we both knew there was no other way. The next week, I withdrew from college. The week after that, I got a full-time job as a cashier at Save Mart, and I picked up weekend shifts waiting tables at a diner called Mel's. Those first few months weren't too bad, honestly. I was tired, sure, but I was young and strong, and Brandon was so grateful. He'd come home from class and find me exhausted on the couch, and he'd massage my feet and tell me I was amazing. He'd help with laundry, cook dinner on weekends, and kiss me goodnight with such tenderness that I knew, absolutely knew, we were building something beautiful together. Just a few more years, he'd whisper. Then I'll take care of you. I'll give you everything, Grace. I promise. I believed him completely. But medical school wasn't 2 years. It was 4 years of constant studying, then residency after that. By Brandon's second year, my 2 jobs weren't enough anymore. His textbooks alone cost hundreds of dollars. He needed special equipment, a laptop that could handle medical imaging software, professional clothes for his clinical rotations. I picked up a 3rd job cleaning offices at night from 8 until midnight 4 days a week. My schedule became brutal. Wake up at 5 in the morning, get ready, work the cashier counter from 7 until 2. Come home, nap for an hour if I was lucky, then clean offices from 4 until 8. 3 nights a week, I'd go straight from cleaning to the diner, waitressing until 2 in the morning. I'd get home, shower, sleep for 3 hours, and start over again. My body started showing the strain. My hands got rough and calloused from cleaning chemicals and carrying heavy trays. I lost weight because I was too tired to eat properly. I'd grab whatever was quick, crackers, cheap ramen, sometimes just coffee. The dark circles under my eyes became permanent. My college friends stopped calling because I never had time to see them anyway, but Brandon was doing well. Really well. He was at the top of his class, impressing his professors, getting excellent marks in his clinical rotations. And he still loved me. Or at least I thought he did. He still said thank you when I handed him money for his textbooks. He still held me at night when we both finally made it to bed. The cracks started showing in his 3rd year. Brandon got accepted into a prestigious residency program, and suddenly he was around different people. Wealthy people. His classmates came from families with money, families who could pay for medical school without blinking. Their wives and girlfriends wore nice clothes, got their hair done at salons, talked about art galleries and wine tastings. One night, Brandon came home from a study group and looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in weeks. I was in my Save Mart uniform, my hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, eating cereal for dinner because I was too exhausted to cook. Grace, he said slowly, why don't you ever dress up anymore? I looked down at myself confused. I just got off an 8-hour shift. I have to be at the office building in an hour to clean. I know, but don't you want to look nice sometimes? For yourself? I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Brandon, I barely have time to sleep. When would I dress up? And for what? To scrub toilets? He didn't say anything else that night, but the comment stuck with me. I started noticing other little things. The way he'd turn away slightly when I tried to kiss him goodbye in the morning, like my Save Mart vest embarrassed him. The way he stopped inviting me to medical school events. The way he'd suggest I maybe take better care of myself. During his 4th year, the comments got worse. He started comparing me to other people without even realizing it. Jeremy's girlfriend just started her own business consulting company. She's really impressive. Or, did you see what Dr. Sanders' wife was wearing at the graduation preview? That's the kind of elegance that really stands out. I tried. God, I really tried. I bought cheap makeup from the drugstore and watched YouTube tutorials at 3 in the morning, trying to learn how to look elegant. I saved tips for 2 months to buy one nice dress. I borrowed library books about current events so I could have intelligent conversations when Brandon occasionally let me attend his functions. But I was still working 3 jobs. I was still exhausted. And no amount of cheap makeup could hide the bone-deep tiredness in my eyes. The worst part? Brandon stopped noticing my sacrifices. He stopped saying thank you when I handed him money. He stopped helping around the apartment. His studies were too important, he said. He started sleeping in the spare room because my alarm for my 5 a.m. shifts disturbed him. The man who used to massage my tired feet now barely looked at them. Brandon's graduation day arrived on a sunny Saturday in May. I sat in the auditorium with hundreds of other people, watching as medical students walked across the stage in their caps and gowns to receive their diplomas. When they called Brandon's name, Dr. Brandon Pierce, I stood up and cheered louder than anyone else in that room. Tears streamed down my face. 6 years. 6 years of working myself into the ground had led to this moment. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the courtyard. I'd spent 2 weeks' worth of tips on a simple navy blue dress and a pair of low heels from a discount store. I'd done my hair and makeup carefully that morning, using tutorials I'd memorized. I wanted to look nice for Brandon. I wanted him to be proud of me, the way I was proud of him. I found Brandon surrounded by his classmates and their families. Everyone was laughing, taking photos, celebrating. I walked up and touched his arm gently. "Congratulations, Dr. Pierce," I said, smiling up at him. He turned, and for just a second, barely a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Not happiness or love. Something else. Something that looked almost like embarrassment. "Grace, hey," he said, his voice flat. He didn't hug me, didn't kiss me. Just turned back to his conversation. "Everyone, this is my wife, Grace." A tall, elegant woman in a cream-coloured suit extended her hand to me. Her nails were perfectly manicured, painted a soft pink. "Veronica Ashford," she said, her smile bright and cool. "I work in hospital administration at Metropolitan Elite. We've been trying to recruit Brandon for months." "Oh," I said, shaking her hand. My own nails were bare and short, the skin around them rough from cleaning chemicals. "That's wonderful." "Brandon is incredibly talented," Veronica continued, not really looking at me, but at Brandon. "We need brilliant surgeons like him. The salary package we're offering is extremely competitive." Another classmate, a guy named Thomas, joined the conversation with his wife, a woman in a designer dress who I'd overheard earlier talking about their recent trip to Paris. "Pierce, you're set for life, man. Elite salary plus the reputation. You'll be unstoppable." Thomas's wife smiled at me, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And you must be so relieved, Grace. Brandon told us you've been working while he was in school. Retail, wasn't it? You must be exhausted." The way she said retail made it sound like something dirty. "I worked several jobs," I said quietly, whatever was needed. "How charming," she said, and turned back to Veronica to discuss some restaurant I'd never heard of. I stood there for another 20 minutes, invisible in my discount dress, while Brandon talked and laughed with people who belonged to a world I couldn't enter. Finally, I touched his arm again. "Brandon, I'm going to head home. I have a shift at the diner tonight." He frowned. "Tonight?" "It's my graduation day." "I know, I'm sorry, but I couldn't get anyone to cover, and we need the money." "We need the money," he repeated, but his tone was strange. "Grace, I'm about to start making 6 figures. Do you really need to keep waitressing?" I stared at him. 6 years of 3 jobs, 6 years of 4 hours of sleep, 6 years of sacrificing everything. And he was asking if I really needed to work. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Until your first paycheck clears and we know we're stable, yes, I need to work." He sighed like I was being difficult. "Fine, I'll probably be out late anyway. Veronica and us, a group of us. Networking, Grace. It's important for my career." I went home alone and put on my diner uniform. That night, I served coffee and burgers to people who tipped poorly, and I thought about Brandon at some expensive restaurant with Veronica Ashford, talking about things I couldn't understand. 3 weeks later, Brandon got the job at Metropolitan Elite Hospital. His starting salary was $200,000 a year. When he told me, I cried with relief. Finally, I could quit at least one job, maybe two. Maybe I could go back to school and finish my degree.